Your beliefs and worldview are directly related to where you were born and how you were raised. Of course, this is on a spectrum as you grow older, but major cognitive shifts have to happen for you to radically change what you believe. This seems to be happening a lot lately, and I find it really fascinating. And as I study the psychology of it and learn why my personal beliefs change, it makes things a whole lot easier, and it makes things make a whole lot more sense than when I first started deconstructing, because initially I felt like things were happening without my consent. And they kind of were, because I didn't understand that studying deeper and researching for myself outside my perspective was about to shift my paradigm. Hi, I'm Michaela, and today we're going to talk about how our beliefs are created, how they're formed, and how they can shift. We are born without any preconceived ideas of the world. What we learn as an infant, toddler, small child begins to shape our worldview, sets the stage for how we're going to view life and the world and things going on and how people treat us and what we need to do to find our place in the world. This can be both a positive and negative experience depending on what exactly you are born into and being taught. So beliefs develop over time, and they originate from a bunch of sources. It's not just one thing. Your religion, your culture, your parents, your upbringing, your school, like all kinds of things play into it. But as a toddler, your brain is more susceptible to what's going on. So whatever is setting the stage for your belief system as a toddler and as a young child in single digits, this is what's going to latch on as your paradigm and be the strongest. Imagine you were born into a country, to a family that is nothing like what you are religiously, culturally, language-wise. You would not have the same beliefs and traits that you have right now, because where you are born affects what you believe, how you view the world, and who you become. I find it really interesting that a lot of parents in fundamentalism will not teach their children about Santa Claus because they're young and impressionable. And they're afraid that if their child believes in Santa Claus and then later finds out that Santa Claus wasn't real, they'll do the same thing with God. And so they play it safe. Well, I find that really interesting, because how does a child come to not believe in Santa Claus anymore? They are given new information. They're given new stories. They're given new perspectives. They're given kind of a look behind the scenes. And then they realize, oh, Santa Claus isn't real. And for some, it's easier than others. For some, it really hurts. It's devastating. They cry. But no matter how hard it is, no matter how much they want to hold on to that Santa Claus, they realize, okay, Santa's not real. This is my new story. This is my perspective. And they keep on and they keep going. And eventually they're okay. I find it kind of ironic that a lot of us who have left Christianity, it's not because we wanted to turn our back on God to sin or to just live our own lifestyle or whatever the church says. Like they make up all these lies for why we depart from the faith, when really the answer for a lot of us is we saw another perspective, which allowed our brains to shift. We dug into different books, different perspectives. We did our own research. We read the Bible with all the contradictions and the craziness that's written in there, without trying to cover it up and make excuses for, well, we can't understand God. We started thinking for ourselves. So really, in the same way that a child quits believing in Santa Claus, we quit believing in God. And both of them are man-made constructs. So it kind of makes sense. So I was born into an independent fundamental Baptist family. And so the lens that I viewed the world through was from that lens. If I was born into a family in India, I would have taken on their lens, their worldview. If I was born into a family in Poland, I would have taken on their lens and their worldview. My culture would have looked completely different. And chances are I would have been taught that this is the one right way or the best way to view things. What we are raised in becomes a huge part of our identity. Now, in some families, that's not such a bad thing. They give their kids freedom to develop their own identity. But when you get into a cult, a religious cult, a fundamental independent Baptist cult, an independent fundamental Baptist cult, I don't even know the order of the words anymore. My brain is fried. So when you come from a fundamentalist point of view and you're born into that, that becomes your entire identity. Neuroplasticity allows the brain to form and reorganize synaptic connections more easily. That's really hard to say. So toddler brains are more susceptible to neuroplasticity. Their brains are more impressionable as they're in a critical period of development. They're open to new experiences, new thoughts, new patterns, new beliefs. Whatever they bring in, they're going to latch onto and believe as long as it comes from somebody that they trust. So this time is important so they can take in all this information from everything around. Now, neuroplasticity continues into adulthood. We can keep learning until the day we die. That's been proven by science. But it's not quite as neuroplastic as it is when you're a toddler. In toddlers, the brain is rapidly forming connections and adapting to new experiences. Where in adulthood, it becomes more focused. And we can't quite learn things as easily as we could when we were a child, although we can still learn. It's just more focused and not as broad. If you've been around children, especially really little children, you'll notice that they're open and receptive to pretty much anything you want to tell them. They're likely to latch onto it and believe it. Where you get to be an adult, they're going to argue with you, and what they believe in their mind is the way it's going to be, it's going to stay. They're not likely to change. So now backing up a little bit, with all the information I've taught you, your paradigms, your stories of how you view the world are created when you're a child, when you're a toddler, when you're in single digits. You're forming your perception, your worldview, how you're going to see things, how things are going to be colored throughout most, if not your entire life. So if you're given the freedom to explore the world and have different views and not be stuffed into one little box, you're more likely later in life to feel like you can have a choice in your identity, to have more freedom. You can pick and choose who you want to be. You can grab ideas from all these different places that you've observed, all these different perceptions and ways of life, ways of being, styles of music, different movies, different belief systems. You get to create your identity, even though you're not consciously realizing that you have that freedom. If you take a child and they are born into fundamentalist Christianity and you take them to church from day one, and they're taught what to believe about the Bible, what to think, how to interpret each verse, not to look outside of their little paradigm, their little church, their little family for answers that they might have about life. All their answers have to come from the Bible, their church's interpretation of it, their parents. They can't find answers anywhere else. That's taboo. It's dangerous. A child born into fundamentalism is taught that the world is a scary place, that you can only trust the people right there in the church. And then the people in the church, their parents, the pastors, the teachers, teach those children what they want them to know. And so all of that is intentionally taught to children when they're little, too young to make their own decisions, to decide their own worldview. And when you get those kids when they're young, they don't have a lot of hope of shifting their beliefs easily later in life. And the churches know this. I remember being a young adult in church and the leaders telling us, if you get these kids when they're young, then you'll have them through adulthood. And you have a slight chance at getting their parents too. But most likely, you're not going to get a parent without getting the child first. And then at least you've got the child. This is why churches have bus routes. They know what they're doing. They psychologically know what they're doing. Although I would dare say a lot of the workers and the lay people don't understand the psychology behind what's going on. I don't think that they're doing this on purpose. They genuinely think that they're doing the right thing because they think they have the one right belief. Indoctrination is such a horrible thing, like all the way around. On the flip side, if a child is not born into a cult, if they're not born into fundamentalism, if they're given the opportunity to thrive, to have unconditional love, to be told how valuable they are, how unconditionally loved they are, regardless of the choices they make and what they do, and they're not going to hell even if they choose something their parents wouldn't choose, that child is going to grow up with a more secure attachment than a child who was born into fundamentalist religion. Their view of the world is going to be totally different than somebody who was born into fundamentalism. When I learned these things, my brain was completely fascinated. And at the same time, that's the biggest thing that made me let go of Christianity, that made me let go of the Bible and what I believed about the world. Because once I realized that my beliefs were because of where I was born, then I realized where other people were born, that was their beliefs too. Then I realized it wasn't quite the one right way to believe. Because if I would have been born anywhere else, I would have believed something different. And that's when I had more freedom to dive in and to explore like where religion came from, where beliefs came from, how we got to be the way we are. And I find it really fascinating and I find it really free. I am the way I am because of where I was born, the culture I was born into. And the same goes for you. And for my situation, that explains how I fell away from the faith. I used to think that it just happened to me without my control, without me asking for it. And in a way, it kind of did. But what happened was I asked a question when I was 37. And from that question, I started researching and digging deeper and looking at perspectives outside of my faith. And when I started doing that, my brain started bringing in new information. And while it was scary, I found it kind of intriguing. And I started digging around and researching more and more and more. And as I did that, my brain and the neuroplasticity, because of my focus, the neuroplasticity unintentionally shifted. And I was able to view the world in a different way. And as I did that, as I thought I was spiraling downward and out of control, it was my brain opening up to other perspectives. And as I was open to those other perspectives, it broadened my knowledge to realize there is more than one way to view life. And life isn't scary like I thought. And I'm not going to hell like I thought. Hell is a man-made construct. Beliefs and religion are a man-made construct. We each believe what we believe because of our experiences attached to the stories that we've been taught surrounding those experiences. And really is kind of fascinating. Like, we could talk all day about this, but that's all we've got for today. Thanks for coming along. Check out my other videos and don't forget to like and subscribe.